Hi, my name is Michael Swartz. I'm going to show you how to rig up an IK leg in Maya. I'm using Maya 2015, but many of the tools are available in earlier versions as well. I'll make note of the ones that may be a little different. The first thing I want to point out is that it's important to make sure your character is oriented in the right way. So if I go to View, Default View, uh, use this compass down here in the bottom corner and make sure that your character is pointing in the positive Z direction. Okay, now we're ready to set up some joints on this. So I'm going to go into the side orthographic view. And I've already organized my scene so that the geometry is in a group. There's a character group here set up. There's a leg group for the left leg. And inside there, all the details, the sneakers and the pants and so on. And I've placed that on a display layer here for geometry. So I can quickly turn it on and off or template or reference the layer. And I also, we'll get into this in a moment, but I have this wrap deformer. Because this rig has a lot of detail and the shoelaces and the little eye hole things and so on, lots of different pieces on just the shoe alone, I think it will probably be easier to rig it up if I use a wrap deformer. So this wrap deformer is going to actually be the one bound to the skeleton, which we're going to build in a second. And so we'll paint weights on this wrap deformer, and then the wrap deformer will in turn drive the model. Okay, so I'm going to template this layer and go to my animation menu set and go to the skeleton menu and go to Joint Tool, Options, click Reset, and make sure that your primary axis is set to X. And I'm just going to click a joint there, slightly in front of the knee, go down to the ankle, go to the ball, and then straight out to the tip of the toe. And you'll notice it's offset. Let's look at this from the front and select that root joint and move it into the center of the leg. Okay. Be careful not to rotate the joints or to translate them like that, because notice as I move this knee, the rotation orientation of that joint stays the same. So that can be problematic when you start to add things like IK handles and controls. And you may find that you need to place joints quickly and in sort of a loose, rough manner, and then you can always put them on a layer and reference that layer. And so if I were to, let's say, move this and thereby screwing up the rotations and so on. Okay, so this is all messed up, but let's say that this is what I wanted, this like layout. I'm going to reference that layer, use my joint tool again, and I'll just snap to these. And there are tools online that will do the same thing, like mill scripts that will automatically rebuild your joints, and there are even some built-in ones in Maya. But I like to do things in this realm anyway. I like to do them manually, so I have the greatest amount of control. I'm going to delete that and delete that. Okay. So now the next step is just to name these joints. So if you hold down Shift, you can open up the entire hierarchy all at once. And I use a naming convention of JTB. JTB stands for joints that are bound. So this is the hip, left, 01. JTB, knee, left, 01. So the bind joints are the ones that are going to be connected to the actual geometry. So this is ankle, left, 01. JTB, and this is the ball, left, 01. This last one is not going to contribute any rotations or deformation to the model. It's a terminal joint. The end joint does not need to be bound to the skeleton, so I'm going to call it JTE for end joint, and this will be toe, left, 01. I also like to point out that I generally capitalize left and right because the lowercase l looks like an uppercase I, or even an I for that matter. So it's very hard for me to see that. And you can definitely get pretty bleary-eyed working on rigging when you're scrolling through hundreds of nodes. The dense complexity of that is pretty overwhelming. And so every little thing that you do to make your job easier is going to pay dividends later. All right, so now the added benefit of being careful with your naming is when I'm ready to bind these joints to my rig, which I am now, I'm going to turn off my geometry and turn on my wrap deformer, which is what this is, the bind geometry. I have the added benefit of quickly making a selection of just the bind joints and excluding the end joints. So I'm going to type up here in the search field. You can get this up here. Go to select by name, and we're going to select an asterisk, wildcard, and type in JTB, and then close it with another asterisk and click return. And look at that, it selected all of the joints that are bind joints, but it did not select the last one. So if you had a character that had hundreds of joints, maybe even a multi-skeleton rig with IK and FK switching, which would literally result in many, many joints, this can save you a ton of time. And it's also efficient because we don't want to bind joints accidentally that don't need to be bound. It's just more weight painting that we have to do in the bind process. So with that selected, and then let's shift select that wrap deformer object, and we're going to go up to skin smooth bind. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this because I'm planning on making a separate tutorial that will cover all of these smooth binding methods, but I would like to just remind you that there are some great details inside the documentation on smooth bind, and there's a couple things that I just want to point out that you should definitely read up on. One is that is this section here, normalize weights. That's an important thing to understand. And then from there, you can learn about the tools, classic linear, dual quaternion, weight blended. These are the different skinning methods. But if you can understand the normalizing weights and how that works and how weight gets distributed to vertices, and the two main primary methods of post or interactive, if you can understand those, you'll be in really good shape. So I'm going to just cover some basics here. I'm going to bind to just the selected joints, nothing else. I don't want the hierarchy or anything like that. The bind method is going to be closest distance. I'm going to use a weight blended skinning method, which is a combination of classic linear and dual quaternion. Post is a kind of a new method. Actually, I'm much more familiar with the interactive, but the post, I guess as of Maya 2011, it's a nice method as well. It basically means that the normalized weights are not going to kind of kick in until the geometry actually gets deformed. So that can fix some problems that we dealt with in the past where vertices might pop through and all of a sudden jump from one point to another unexpectedly. That resolves some of that. I still generally prefer to do interactive for a lot of things because it's a little more straightforward and I guess you could say brute force. But for now, I'm going to just leave it on post. And let's see, allow multiple bind poses. That's fine. Max influences, that means that a single vertex can have no more than 3 joints selected. And I think I could actually bring this down to 2, and I can always smooth it later and change the value if I need to. But now, basically, a single vertex can have no greater than 2 joints influencing it. And in my case, in this particular rig, that might work out in my favor. Let's hope. All right, then leave these 2 unchecked. I don't want to maintain the max influences. Let's see, and let's see, the colorized skeleton, you know, that's just an easy way to see the I guess the visualization of the colors of the when you're painting the weights. Anyway, it can be helpful. And then the drop off rate, I tend to, you know, do a range of like 5 to 10. It's a little bit of a high drop off rate, so it falls off quickly, and then I can always smooth it after the fact. So let's click bind skin now. All right, so now let's take a look and see how these things deform. And you can see that there seems to be some kind of pinching in the back of the knee here. So let's fix that. You select the geometry, and we're going to go up to Skin, Paint Skin Weights tool. And I'm going to select the hip. Just take a look at that, see what influence it has. Sometimes it's helpful to look at it in this use color ramp mode. And you can see that the greatest influence is white, the least influence is black. Blue is like nearly nothing. So sometimes you have to, I often go back and forth between these two views, depending on the situation I'm in. I'm going to go back to the black and white view here, and I need to paint more influence for the knee, right, in this crevice here. So I'm going to set this to replace, and value of 1, and start to paint. Whoops, and I need to make sure I've got my knee selected, okay, and I'll paint those vertices there. Okay. And now I'm going to go to the hip and make sure that the hip has more of this part right here selected. Going inside the geometry, sometimes it's really handy. Okay. All right. Oh, it looks like there's a kind of a stray vertex in there. Let's fix that. Just shrink down my brush. And you can use the Shift key to smooth. So if you need to smooth any of these weights, you can just, as you're painting with this brush, you can smooth those out. All right, so now let's take a look at the deformation on this. Okay, so I think I could smooth it a little bit. So I'm going to select the geometry, hit Y to recall my paint smooth weights tool. I'm going to bring up the size of the brush here and just smooth this out a little bit more. This vertex right here, I think needs to have more influence from the knee. So I'm going to go to the knee, I'm sorry, the hip rather, and I'm going to add more influence to that particular vertex. Maybe replace with that with a value of 1, and on the knee, I'm going to decrease that value, and let's do 0. Okay, so now it's 100% from the hip. Maybe a little bit too much, so let's smooth it out. And you can also go to the knee and just like add a little tiny bit. So we'll change the value to 0.1 and just paint. Maybe, whoop, we're using replace. Let's use add, and we'll click a couple times on that to smooth it out. Okay. Let's try this out again. All right. We can also do some volume preservation on this. Hit Y again and go to, instead of painting skin weights, let's paint the dual quaternion blend weight. Okay, and the value we'll use 1. And I'm going to paint in the areas that I want to preserve volume. Okay, and I know I probably want to preserve some of the volume here around the ankle as well. Okay, now let's switch back to painting skin weights. All right, next is the ankle. I'm going to zero out that rotation there, and let's work on the ankle. Okay, so it needs some more influence on the heel. The heel is probably has too much influence from either the ball or the knee. And so we need to make sure that it's only getting influence from the heel. So to do that, let's select that geometry, hit Y, and go to the ankle, and go to replace, and a value of 1. And let's just paint all that white. And we're going to have to zero out some of the other joints as well. Okay, let's look at the knee. Yes, the knee has some influence there, so I'm going to replace that with a value of 0. And let's look at the ball as well. Make sure there's nothing there. Sometimes if you use this color ramp, you can see with the blue, the blue indicates subtle values that are very difficult to see in the black and white view. And it looks like it's pretty good. Let's just go to the knee though and make sure, there's one I missed. There's another couple. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the rotations again. Looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to zero out that. Again, I'm going to make a separate tutorial for the painting skin weights. That's a whole day-long lesson right there. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Let's look at the ball now and rotate it down, and yeah, it's like looking very rubbery. So we need to select the geometry, hit Y to recall the smooth skin tool, paint skin weights tool. And let's look at the ankle. So the ankle is having a lot of influence on that toe, and it really shouldn't. So I'm going to replace that with 0, a value of 0 on the toe. Okay, I don't want any influence on that coming from the ankle. Now going to the ball. Now the ball should not have any influence over here. So let's get rid of it. Okay, and I think that I need to just smooth this out for the most part. But before I do that, I'm going to actually add or replace this area with 100% influence. And now I can smooth it. You can also flood a smooth operation. So if you click on smooth with an opacity of, let's say, 0.1, which is 10%, I'm just going to flood it a couple times, and you can see it's smoothing the values a little. And I'm going to go back to replace, back to an opacity of 100 and a value of 1, and smooth this region as well. All right, and then these vertices right here need to be more influenced by the ankle. So I'm going to go back to the ankle, and using replace and a value of 1, I'm going to paint all these. And I'm just holding shift to smooth the values on those. And I'm going to turn off the ramp for a second so I can see this in just illuminance. Okay. These vertices still need to have more influence, but it could be some crossover problems between the influence of the ball joint and the influence of the ankle. So I'm going to just look at the two of them, toggle them back and forth like this. And these vertices right here, right along here, need to have more influence from the ankle. So I'm going to go to replace, value add, and click on them like that. And let's go to the ball now, and let's decrease the influence on those. So I'm going to replace them with, let's say, value of 10%. I'm just clicking one time on those vertices. These should be 0. So I'm going to set the value to 0. Paint away the influence on those. Okay, let's take a look at how it deforms. And that's probably just fine for the toe. It's not going to go that extreme. It's probably maybe at most going to look perhaps like that. It might go up that high, but it seems to be deforming nicely. Okay, so that's painting skin weights, a really quick overview, but I'm going to go in much more detail later in another tutorial. Okay, so we've got our geometry named, our joints are named. The next step is to begin to create a rig for this, and we need to create some IK handles to start. So I'm going to turn off the wrap deformer for now and look at the joints on their own. And let's go up to Skeleton IK Handle Tool options, and let's set this to be a rotate plane solver. And we're going to go from the hip to the ankle, and then hit the Y key to recall the tool again, and go from the ankle to the ball. And then let's go from the ball to the toe. And let's rename these. It's important to do this as you go along. It will save you a ton of time later. Let's call this IK handle ankle left. This is going to be IK handle ball left and toe left. Let's rename these effectors as well. the effectors define the end of the IK handle. So if I turn on the manipulator tool and just select them, you can see where they are. Effector 1 is the end of the ankle one, so I'm going to call this effector underscore ankle left. Effector 2 is the ball. And the effector 3 is the toe left. Okay. Really important to name your stuff logically and consistently. Okay, so now we need to build some controls, some control curves for our rig so that the animator can easily make selections and move it. So what I usually do for the foot is I start from a cube, a polycube, and I trace it using a curve. And it makes a great control curve because it's visible from perspective and orthographic cameras. So let's create a polycube, shift right click, polycube. And I'm going to temporarily turn off the visibility of the joints and the IK handle. Move that to the side for now. I'm also going to temporarily put this cube on a display layer. And I'm going to, let's just call it temp cube. And I'm going to reference the layer. Okay. So I can't select it by accident, but I can still snap to it. Let's go up to Create EP Curve tool, set it to be linear. And I'm going to hold down, I'm going to go into wireframe mode, so 4, and vertex snap to all of these corners. Okay, so now we can delete that cube and we can delete the display layer. And then we can turn the joints and the IK handle back on. And if I ever want to create that cube again, if you go into the script editor down here in the bottom right corner, you'll see that here's the code for making that curve. And all of these numbers represent the XYZ coordinates of each point that I clicked. So if I wanted to save that for future use, because I like adding that shape as a control curve. So let's middle mouse drag just that code up to the shelf. We'll make it a Mel script. Let's go into edit that curve. And there's the code for it in Mel. And we're going to change the tooltip to make cube control curve. Okay. And we'll just call this CRV CB. Okay. Save the shelf. I already did this previously. I'm going to delete that one. Okay. So now let's turn on the geometry again. Turn off the template, and we're going to move this into position. Let's look at it from the front view and put it into place. And I'm going to grab these control vertices and these and just pull them forward to fit around the foot. Okay. So now we have a pretty decent control curve, and I'm going to put this, I'm going to freeze the transformations and delete any history on it and put this on a new layer, and this will be anim curves. Or anim, let's call it anim controls, and make it yellow. Okay. All right, let's rename this and call it CTRL underscore leg left anim. And I'm a little redundant in my naming when it comes to control curves, because when I'm looking at a list of dozens of control curves, depending on the context and what I'm looking at, sometimes it's easier to see it in the beginning of the name or at the end of the name. And I also make a distinction between control curves that I want the animator to affect and control curves that I don't want the animator to affect. The ones that have the word anim at the end are curves that I want the animator to work with. There are some things that they might not animate with, or they might not be part of a character set, but they still are control curves, and therefore I would use control but exclude the word anim. All right, now the next thing is we need to change the pivot point of this so that it's where the ankle is. So I'm going to hold down the D key and then hold down the V key and middle mouse snap it. I'm having trouble there with the pivot mode because there's too much stuff on top of it. So I'm going to just rotate around and into a better angle to see that joint. In fact, I could turn off the geometry for now. And hold down D and V for vertex snapping, and we're going to snap it to that joint by middle mouse clicking on this joint. So once again, that's D for going into edit pivot mode. V, so I'm holding down D and V simultaneously, and middle mouse, and you might have to wiggle your mouse a little bit, and it will snap right up to that joint. Okay, so the next step is we need to change the rotation order of this control. By default, everything in Maya uses a rotation order of X, Y, Z. And if we open up the attribute editor for this control and go to the transform node, you can see that the rotate order is X, Y, Z. And for a lot of things, that's just fine. But for a character where it might be dancing around or turning in space around Y frequently, you might run into a situation where you rotate so far that the two of the planes become parallel with each other. And then all of a sudden, you're locked and you can't move your rig in the right way. And it's called Gimbal Lock. Gimbal Lock is when you rotate, let's say, Z, and it matches up with Y, and all of a sudden you can't rotate either one of them effectively. They're both trying to do the same thing, and you're counter animating and constantly flipping the rotate order to fix it. It's a real big pain. So I've found, and I've learned this from other masters, that the foot control generally works better in ZXY. And the reason for that is because if you think about it, the primary orientation that this foot is going to be moving is probably around Y. You're going to be turning the character and orienting it in space in Y direction. And then the second degree that's very common would be in X. And then the last, least most important is Z. You're not going to be worrying about this as much as Y or X. So, and the way that it works is it's kind of backwards the way it's read. Y is the end letter is solved first. So we want it to be ZXY so that Y is solved first, then X, and then Z. And that will not completely eliminate the possibility of Gimbal Lock, but it certainly puts us in a much better position than the standard XYZ. So for the foot, and it's different for different parts of the body. It depends on the movement, the kinds of movement that it's going to do. So you'll just have to experiment and think about which things are more important to happen first, and that will help. That will help you figure out which rotate order it should be. So ZXY, and let's close that. Now the next step is to we need to create some controls to move these IK handles. And they all need to have the same exact rotate order as this. So rather than creating a group that has those same rotate orders independently, I'm just going to duplicate this. So select that curve and Control D, duplicate. And now I want to make this an empty group. I don't want the curve anymore. I just want this group which has all the transforms, the rotate order, etc. So to do that, you can select this and just press the down key to quickly get at the shape node and delete. And you can see now we have an empty group, or a null. And this null, we can duplicate that a few more times. Let me show you another way to get at that. Some people I've shown this to are confused what I did, but if you click on that and press down, you're selecting the shape. But another way to see that, if you go to Display, Shapes, now you can open that up and you can delete the shape node. The shape is the curve itself. The transform is this group. It's a null object. I like the shortcut down key. All right, I'm going to rename this. This is good. Well, actually, before I rename it, let's just duplicate it 2 more times. So we have 3 copies of it. The first one is going to be called GRP CTRL for control, toe, lift, left. Okay, this one's going to be GRP CTRL, ball, lift, left. And this one will be GRP CTRL, toe, wiggle, left. All right, and we need to move these pivot points into the right place. They're all right now stacked on top of each other on the ankle. But the toe lift pivot should actually be down here and the tip of the toe. So I'm going to hold down D and V and middle mouse snap it to the toe. Ball lift, same deal, but it's going to be on the ball. So D, V, middle mouse snap. Toe wiggle is also going to be on the ball. D, V, middle mouse snap. Okay, so all the pivot points are in the right place. And now we need to put the IK handles into the right place. So the first thing, let's just move all these nulls inside of the control, the foot control itself, the curve, okay? And then the IK handles, we need to put these in the right place. So the ankle, let's parent the toe lift, the ball lift. Let's put the ball lift inside the toe lift group. So middle mouse drag that. There it is. All right, and then the toe wiggle, the toe wiggle, let's put that, that toe inside the toe lift as well. So these 2 things are both inside of the toe lift group. And then the ankle is going to go into the ball lift. Middle mouse drag that over. Let's open it up just so we can see them all. And then the IK handle toe left rather, is going to go into the toe wiggle group. And let's test them out. So the leg control should move them all. I'm going to just change the background color, Option B to change the background color in Maya, just so I can see the joints a little bit better. All right, and so that works, right? And it's rotating all of the other groups. You can't directly rotate IK handles, but you can rotate the groups, which moves them. And let's try rotating the toe lift. All right, so that I need to fix the this ankle needs to be inside the toe lift. So now if I rotate the toe lift, the whole foot moves. Let's try the toe wiggle. That's good. And the ball lift. Great. Okay, so it's all working. Okay, the next step is we need to add some custom attributes to this leg control to automatically rotate these, because I don't want the animator to select these, have to select these groups and rotate them manually. I want all the controls to be in one place where it's easy to grab. So select the foot control, go to Modify, Add Attribute. And let's name the first one toe lift, and it should be a float value, and the default should be 0. Let's click add, and then the next one is going to be toe wiggle, and I'm not putting a space there, but Maya will automatically put a space in the display, the nice name, because I've made this a capital W. Let's click add. All right, next one is going to be ball lift, and this is going to be foot lean, and this will be toe twist, and click OK. We're done. All right, the next step is we need to connect those custom attributes. So they're all listed here, but we need to connect them up. Let's go to Window, General Editors, Connection Editor, and make sure that you turn off Show Non-Keyable in both the right and left displays, because otherwise you'll see this, which is just too much information. We don't need to see all that. Here are our custom attributes, and I'm going to connect those up individually. So the first one, let's do the first one. The first one is going to be the toe lift. Reload right. So you select the toe lift, reload right. Let's open up rotate, and toe lift is going to drive rotate X. Let's do toe wiggle, and select toe wiggle, reload toe wiggle over here. So toe wiggle attribute is going to drive rotate X of the toe wiggle group. And let's do ball lift. Now ball lift is going to drive the ball lift group. So let's reload that, go to rotate. So ball lift is going to drive rotate X. Foot lean, actually let's skip down to toe twist. Toe twist is going to be driving the rotate and Y of the toe lift. So let's select toe lift again, go back to that, rotate, and we're going to, for this, we want to drive this direction, right? For the toe twist, rather. So toe twist is going to drive rotate Y. Now the foot lean is, we could for the foot lean, we could drive that with the it could be the toe twist, or we could twist it off of the ball. So let's do the ball. I think that's a better place to put that. So let's reload right, and we're going to be rotating this in Z, right? So so we're going to foot lean, driving, rotate Z. Close that, we're done. Now let's test it out. Select the control, and let's try it out. We've got our toe lift, toe wiggle, ball lift, foot lean, leans back and forth, and the toe twist. Cool. All right, so the next step is we need to make a control for the knee. So right now we have the ability to move the rig, and we can rotate, but sometimes we want to rotate the knee independently of the foot. So we need to add a pull vector control for that. To do that, let's go to the side view and let's draw a triangle. Let's go to create EP curve tool. Once again, we're using a linear curve, and I'm just going to draw a triangle. Okay, and hit return. And I'm going to freeze, or I'm not freeze. I'm going to center the pivot and snap it to the knee. So use your move tool, hold down V, and vertex snap it to the knee. I'm going to scale it down a little bit as well. And let's see, and move it out this way. Let's scale it. Okay. You know, about a step and a half ahead is probably sufficient. All right, we need to make sure that since we snapped it, it is lined up, but we need to make sure all these translations are frozen. So let's go to Modify, Freeze Transformations, delete the history on that as well. And we're going to call this CTRL leg PV left and anim underscore anim, because this is an animation control, and I'll put this on the animation control layer. So add selected. So that turns yellow. So right now it's not doing anything, and all we have to do is to make it affect the pull vector of the leg so we can control the knee is select it and then shift select the IK handle on the ankle. Go up to constrain pull vector. And now if we move the leg up, we can rotate independently of the knee. But sometimes it's nice to be able to rotate the knee at the same time as the foot. So what I'll do often is I'll take this foot control, I'm going to duplicate it again. So we have a duplicate down here. I'm going to delete all the contents again, just like before, and I'm going to delete the shape node as well. Delete it, hit the down arrow. And I'm going to call this GRP knee left. And the nice thing about doing it that way is, once again, all the rotate orders are correct, and it's also located on the same place where the leg control was already. So the transform attributes are all just the way I need them. I'm going to put that PV control in there. And now I'm going to select this foot control and command click or control click on the PC on this knee left group. And we're going to do a constrain, point constrain. So now if we move the foot control, the knee control will move with it. But it doesn't rotate with it yet. So we need to connect that up. I'm going to select the foot control again, go to Window, General Editors, Connection Editor, and the rotate Y of this foot control is going to drive the rotate Y of the knee control group. So let's go to rotate Y. Now if I select this foot and rotate it around, you'll see it rotates with it. I can move it up. I can move it forward and back. I can rotate it. And I have the additional control of offsetting this. Let's go to Object. And you can see that with this, I can actually control it independently. So let's zero all this stuff out. Go back to the beginning here. All right, and the next thing that we need to do is to, in my case, I need to bind the, it looks like the rig is working. I need to just make that wrap deformer take effect of my geometry here of the leg. So I'm going to clean up a little bit here and let's put the skeleton into a group called group skeleton all, but inside of there we'll put another group called GRP skeleton leg left, and we'll put that inside the character all, and we'll also put the control curve here, this control curve, and the I'm going to select both of these and put those into a group and call this GRP anim controls, and we'll put those into the character node as well. All right, and let's put this wrap deformer in there as well. Let's not call this geo, let's just call this group character all. And we'll put this in here. So now I've cleaned up the outliner nicely. Now we've got our geometry here. We could put that in a geometry layer. Let's do group geo all. And we've got our skeleton, our animation controls, our wrap deformers, and our geometry. All right, now we need to set up the wrap deformer. So I'm going to hit 5 to go into shaded view here. And I'm going to select the geometry that I want to bind. So this leg, followed by the wrap deformer object. So Command click on that, or Control on the PC. And then go to Create Deformers, Wrap Deformer. And by the way, if you ever not sure what a tool does, it will often tell you down here in the help line, the status line. So, and you can see that if you go to Display, UI Elements, Status line, that will reveal the tooltips of what different things do in Maya. So Wrap Deformer, it says select surfaces and an influence object. And let's go to the options, and I think the default should be fine, but we may have to make some adjustments. Let's click Create. Okay. And let's test it out.